Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of the Voron 2 series. Today I'm just going to start with just two things that I wanted to get out of the way, which one of them was to be covered in the last episode and I forgot. The other one is just a quick update. So I'm going to start with the measurement of the chamber temperature when printing ABS with a 100-degree bed. The reason I'm showing you this is just to get an idea of the baseline before we do any more high temperature stuff. So yeah, right now I'm printing ABS. This print has been going on for about 10 hours and you can see that there is over 30 degrees delta T combined to, relative to the room temperature, and it's about 60 degrees chamber temperature, which is pretty good for a 100-degree bed. And because it's also pretty good because I didn't really seal everything like around the motors and around the door. We will definitely work on that at a later episode. So yeah, just wanted to get this out of the way so that there is actually a baseline when we improve the insulation and work on higher temperature printing. So you will get an idea of how well the insulation is working. And moving on from that, there are two small mods I had to make to this printer to be able to actually monitor the prints because I had a spaghetti. So I had to remove two of the insulation covers. This is temporary and that's to mount the webcam. I'll design a different mount for that. Again, this is temporary, but right now it's working. And the more Ghetto mod is how I mounted the LED strip. Basically, on one side we have the wire and that's directly soldered to the LED strip like you'd expect. And the LED strip on that side is just hanging on that wire, so just the solder joints. It's terrible, I know, but it's temporary. On the other side, I just have a piece of string that I wrapped around the spool holders on the top, and that's holding that end of the LED strip. Again, not great, but this lets me actually monitor the print while it's going on, and that will definitely save me some headaches down the line. But obviously both of these will be fixed pretty soon, or most likely. I just need to design a LED strip mount and a mount for the camera, and yeah, that should be a relatively easy fix, but that's not going to be in this episode, just something I just quickly wanted to show, so we can actually move on to the main event of this episode, I think, and that's the Nevermore Max Air Filter. So let's get to it. I assembled the Nevermore Max Air Filter. This is the biggest Nevermore filter out there. It's huge and it uses a ton of active carbon pellets in here, and it also has HEPA filters on the sides, 4 in total. As I said, this is the largest Nevermore filter, and theoretically this should last quite some time filtering the air without actually running out of filtering capacity, or whatever you'd call it. I actually wanted to cover the process of just assembling this, and I actually started filming it, but honestly it's just a bit too complicated, so at some point I gave up. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll do something like that in the future. But there are some parts that are really complicated. For example, the fan assembly. I printed a cheat sheet here, but even with that it was kind of complicated to do. And there are some parts like these. This is from a Noctua fan that I had. These rubber dampeners that come with PC case fans that you have to use 3 of these that again weren't documented and stuff like that. So it is obviously still not finalized, at least that's what I'm assuming, at least in terms of the documentation, but I'm assuming the design is mostly finished. But anyway, here it is. This is how it looks from the front. It is ginormous. It weighs definitely more than 3 kilograms because this can't weigh it, and if the human scale is to be believed, which it's not designed to weigh just 5 kilos, but yeah, if that's to be believed, this is about 5.5 kilos, which yeah, is definitely a lot. But yeah, it's just because of the carbon pellets and stuff like that, and I think it will work pretty well. Obviously this is going to be installed on my Voron 2, but as I said before, it will take me a while to do this. I still want to finish printing the Enrage Rabbit project parts, the Voron 0 parts and the TinyM parts, and then the parts I want for the upgrades for the Voron 2 before I actually install anything. So This will definitely appear in a later episode as well. Yeah, this is... I need to fix this at some point. Anyway, if you can't tell, it's going like this. So anyway, yeah, this will definitely appear in a later episode, but today I just wanted to show you how it works and the idea of it. So yeah, let's take a look at the back. So normally there's supposed to be another panel here that is optional, that's why I didn't install it, but I do have a panel that I can install here. This is PVC foam. It's pretty easy to cut and it should work pretty well. And I could install it, but I'm not going to. Instead, I designed this part so just to channel the air a bit nicer. This should theoretically be a bit worse in terms of just noise reduction, but yeah, it should still work pretty well. And we're talking about a 3D printer here, not a computer or anything, so it's obviously going to make some noise, but it's not going to be too bad, I don't think, when it's actually installed. But right now it is actually pretty loud. You'll also see some red stuff here. That's actually RTV silicone. It's not the greatest application here. That's for the wire of the fan. And I also stuck this part that I designed with RTV silicone here as well. And in fact, I actually used it all around the body to seal any of the gaps. That should work better for filtering. No air should be able to escape, and that's the idea. But yeah, I don't know how much of a difference that makes in real life. I also used it for the fans as well, so the holes for the fans are a bit too large, and he says, the designer of this on desk, he says that's by design, so you can use foam tape, which I'm sure will work well, but at the same time I decided it would be easier for me to just use RTV silicone to stick them in there, and that should also dampen them, so yeah, that's what I did. And I actually haven't tested the loudness of those fans, but they should be fine. I use those fans on my Voron too for the layer fan, so I know they work relatively quietly, so those aren't going to be too loud, but yeah, the fan here will be loud. But yeah, just wanted to show you this. As I said, this will be installed in a later Voron 2 episode, so stay tuned for that. And as I said before that, I want to print the Voron 0 parts, the Tiny M parts, and Rage Rabbit project, the rest of the skirts for the Doom Cube, and possibly high temp Doom Cube, at least the gantry parts of it in high temp material, possibly. So yeah, it will be a while, but stay tuned for that. And I do have my BME 680 air quality monitor, so I'm definitely going to utilize that to get an idea of how much it affects the air quality, at least inside the chamber, because this is actually a recirculating filter, forgot to mention that. So this is actually not supposed to exhaust the air unless you use the 4010 fan here. As long as you don't use that, this is supposed to just recirculate the air, which is what you want in a high temp printer if you want to filter it. So yeah, this should work pretty well, but again, we'll do some testing when I install this. But for now, just know that this is ready, and it will be installed pretty soon when I get to mounting the rest of the mods that I printed. But again, I just want a working printer as a backup. But speaking of high temperature 3D printing, I was printing the CF nylon parts for the Tiny M, and I had a print failure, but looking closely at the tool head, well, that gap ain't supposed to be there. This is sagging like crazy, so yeah, there's probably something going on with the ABS. This is something I expected, but I didn't expect it to happen this soon. But I did inspect the rest of the parts, and there is no damage on any of them, so I'm assuming it only happened here because it is closest to the tool head, sorry, the hot end and the heat bed, and that's why it's not on other parts. At least that's what I'm assuming. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the parts. When we take a closer look at the parts, we can see that the deformation is mostly around where the hot end is. That makes sense because for printing the CF nylon I was printing, I had to crank up the hot end temperature to around 305 degrees. It's also closer to the bed, and that could also have some effect on the parts, but there are other parts that are closer to the bed, like the fan mount and the pivot block on the bottom MGN9 rail for the x-axis that are just fine. So it means the most likely problem is the hot end temperature. So with this part you can see some deformation around the bottom of it, as I said, and you can see that the heat set inserts sagged quite a bit. And in this picture you can see some deformation. This is the back mount of the Dragon hot end, and in the next picture, which is the fan duct of the Dragon hot end and the front mount of it, again you can see some deformation around where the Dragon hot end seat block sits. So as I said, that's the most likely reason. For a regular Voron build, ABS is probably the best material you can choose, especially for bang for buck, but once you start expanding into high temp territory, well, ABS still doesn't work really well. It works much better than PETG and PLA, but it's still not good enough, so you need something like nylon or polycarbonate, something that can actually live in those temperatures, and ABS isn't that. So as a replacement for these, since I don't have a working 3D printer, again, I'm going to order these in MJF nylon. MJF is process, nylon is the material, so nylon should work well in high temp environments, so shouldn't be a problem. Only problem with MJF is usually its cost. Like for the parts that I have to order, which I only ordered the damaged parts, I had to pay like $150. So MJF is definitely not cheap. It's probably the most Gucci option you can get, but yeah, in this case it's probably the best choice I have. So I ordered those parts in MJF, and I'm going to install those on my printer and continue printing the TinyM. Eventually, once we're done with printing stuff I mentioned, the TinyM, the Rabbit project, whatever, everything I mentioned, we will reprint the entire gantry of this with some other high temp material. I'm probably going to keep the MJF parts that I ordered, since I had to sell my kidney to get those, so I'm going to keep those, but for the rest of the parts I'm going to print them in polycarbonate, nylon, I don't know, something like that. I'll think about it when I get to that, but that will be in a later video. At the time of recording this, even the MJF parts aren't here. I'm hoping I can edit the pictures of them in before I upload this video, but we'll see. Obviously depends on when they get delivered. But before I end this episode, I wanted to show you some of the updates I have on the CAD again. So yeah, this is the main Doom Cube model that I have, and you can see that now I actually properly modeled the top skirts as well. And yeah, this is how the top electronics chamber looks in theory. For the actual electronics, aka the spider and the board that I haven't designed yet, I'm going to come up with a different mount for these, but other than that, this is how the top chamber is going to look. And this side is actually a bug with Fusion 360 that I don't know why it happens. On the actual model they're solid, but yeah, this side is solid, but on the side we will have the Bowden adapters for the Enraged Rabbit project CAD feeder. I showed all of this before, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But yeah, you can see that now the skirts are split into 3 pieces again, just like the stock version. I had to split them to 4 pieces if you remember, and that was because I had to print them on my Voron 0, but yeah, that never really happened because my Voron 0 stopped working properly. And now that I have my Doom Cube working, and it's not now right now, but should be when I get the MGF parts again, I will be printing all of them on this printer, so I don't need to split them into 4 pieces. That's why I'm splitting them into 3 pieces. And as usual, all of this will be uploaded to GitHub at some point. I also worked on the cable cover, showed this, I think it was in the last episode, but it wasn't deep enough, so I made it deeper. And I also redesigned the panel mount. This stuff, forgot to model it into this CAD, but the point of that is to actually cover the entirety of it. There are 2 reasons for this. One, my cuts are kinda uneven and doesn't look that great, and 2, some air can theoretically escape from that, so I'm going to use rubber seals between them to just block the air path a bit better. So that's the plan, and that's why I redesigned these. And again, I will be printing these in ABS. So the cable covers, the panel mounts, and the top skirts and the remaining bottom skirts, they will all be printed in ABS. But the high temp stuff, as I mentioned, need to be in the gantry. So for the gantry, the Z-probe, and even I think I'm going to reprint polycarbonate panel mounts as well in some sort of a high temperature material, as I said, but that will be a bit later. I also did some work on the wall mounted spool holders. In the last episode I showed you that they were sagging quite a bit, so I'm working on a redesign of these. This is still based on Atei's filament buffer system, so you can see the wheel in here and the arm. So yeah, the idea is to use the same system, but just make it more ideal for wall mounting. So With my design, you can see that the spool actually has supports on both sides, and both sides are pretty thick, so this shouldn't sag at all, especially if I print this in ABS, which is the plan. So yeah, this should be really solid. There are some problems with the current design. I need to block the bottom side of this wheel and the top side of this, and ideally I would like to make these a bit thinner, and ideally, again, if I'm going to release this to the public, which is the plan, I'd like to make this arm length adjustable. So if you're not using E-Sun spools, you will have some adjustments for that. So yeah, this needs some work, but this will definitely be in a later episode. We will definitely fix the wall-mounted spool holders as well. But yeah, that's not going to be in this episode. In fact, this episode is basically over at this point. In the next episode, we will probably work on the Enraged Rabbit project carrot feeder, the main MMU2 type unit. And we will do something else as well. I don't know what that is exactly. Maybe the top skirts, maybe this, the wall-mounted spool holders. I don't know right now, but we will see. And the episode after that, we will print the high temperature gantry stuff. At least that's the plan right now. And we'll probably start installing some of the stuff that we printed in that episode as well, though that whole process will probably take at least 2 episodes, since there's a lot. There's the entire gantry reprint, there's the Nevermore air filter, and then there's the Enraged Rabbit project carrot feeder, and a bunch of other minor stuff as well. So it will take some time, but yeah, we'll see when we get to that. But as I said, that's it for this episode, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a like down below and stay tuned for the next episodes. And yeah, that's it for this video, so thanks for watching.